ini. Kami berharap Bapak Ibu dalam keadaan sehat selalu ya. Jadi untuk agenda hari ini adalah International eLearning Sessions dengan topik Integrated Reporting in the New Normal Era. Jadi sesi hari ini dijadwalkan sekitar 2 jam ya, yaitu nanti hingga kita selesaikan jam 12 siang. So I'm delighted that we already have Professor Uantchern and Bu Erika Susanto online with us. Professor Uantchern, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah.
Morning, everybody.
And his colleague Bu Erika Susanto from Black Sun Group, UK. Good morning, Bu Erika. Thank you.
Good morning.
Okay. Yeah, so Bu Erika is now online from London, and Professor Uantchern from Singapore. So sebelum mulai saya akan bacakan sedikit short profile dari Prof. Loh dan Bu Erika. Prof. Loh adalah memiliki pengalaman yang sangat luas dalam hal ini. Beliau adalah jabatannya adalah Corporate Culture Reporting Practice Leader atau Chief Storyteller CEO dari Black Sun Group Asia Pacific. Prof. Loh bekerja dengan banyak organisasi untuk mengkomunikasikan corporate culture, yaitu melalui annual report, internal communication, website, social media, dan beliau juga telah banyak membantu organisasi memahami siapa stakeholdernya, mengetahui bagaimana tone on the top dan corporate culture. Beliau saat ini adalah adjunct profesor, dia mengajar secara luas ya di bidang ethics dan risk management. Beliau mengajar di Singapore University of Social Science, pernah juga sebagai profesor di National University of Singapore and US. Dia masih menjabat juga beberapa jabatan sebagai Vice President of Board Member di Singapore Securities Associations, serta aktif dan pengalaman di banyak organisasi lainnya. Prof. Loh memiliki gelar Master in Hospitality Administrations, yaitu dengan tesis terkait BCP atau Business Continuity Planning. Risetnya terkait dengan area risk management, corporate reporting, tax analytics, behavior science, dan beliau adalah chartered accountant dari Malaysia, Australia, Singapura, dan memiliki gelar International Certificate in Investor Relations. Jadi sebelumnya beliau Profesor Uantchern memiliki jabatan sebagai Presiden of Institute of Internal Audit Singapore dan juga cukup lama sebagai Board of Governor di AIS Singapura selama beberapa periode. Ya, kita cukup lama mengenal beliau. Beliau pernah mensupport di acara kita juga di Indonesia, pernah di Bali dan beberapa acara di Jakarta sebelumnya. Untuk membantu Profesor Loh atau sebagai salah satu speaker juga hari ini, we have Ibu Erika Susanto. Ya, beliau adalah Research Manager di Black Sun Group UK. Jadi mungkin salah satu diaspora Indonesia ya yang ada di sana, dengan passion untuk business sustainability dengan hasil memberikan insight untuk analitik. Bu Erika melalui pendidikannya di US, ya mungkin dari bachelor sampai masternya di US, dengan lebih dari 10 tahun pengalaman penelitian profesional di business consulting dan financial service advisory di kota besar ya. Jadi beliau pernah bekerja di New York, Hong Kong, dan saat ini di London. Pengalaman sebelumnya termasuk riset dengan topik sustainability, yaitu mungkin terkait dengan equity market, market research, advanced statistical model, bagaimana memahami market behavior dan riset dan analisis juga tentang fraud, the effect maupun sekuritas. Bu Erika, mungkin saya boleh bilang salah satu dari sedikit orang Indonesia yang lulus di Harvard ya. Beliau memiliki Master of Arts di statistik dengan konsentrasi di economics, dan University of California Berkeley ya dengan konsentrasi BA statistik dengan konsentrasi di computer science. Prof. Loh, Bu Erika, we are very pleased that you both could take time and lead these sessions. Thank you. So as we go through, we'll pause later periodically for Q&A. Ya, kita akan ada tanya jawab nanti, ada polling juga. Jadi Bapak Ibu sebagai peserta akan bisa langsung berinteraksi ya. Nanti Bu Erika maupun Pak Flo akan bisa elaborate atau explain dari result polling tersebut ya. Jadi I suggest that participants can write questions in the chat function in Zoom, and bisa juga you can send privately to myself if you want to in Bahasa or in English, or send publicly to everyone that we can read all the question together. So Prof. Law will address this question as we go along. So I'm going to hand over now to Prof. Law and Ibu Erika. And when we come back to these questions, I will help and make sure that these questions are raised and can have the best response. So Prof. Law, Ibu Erika, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Pak Rizki. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on integrated reporting in the new normal era. I do apologize that my Bahasa Indonesia is not that great, so I will speak in English, but be happy to hear your questions in Bahasa or in English. And also together with my co-instructor, Bu Erika, we thank you for your participation this morning. What I'm going to do today is to start by sharing with you the synopsis so that you understand in terms of the scope of the presentation, what we're going to cover today. What we're going to start the session with is a brief introduction to integrated reporting by Ibu Erika in terms of, so that we have a common understanding of integrated reporting and what is this all about. And we know that one of the key part of integrated reporting is a business model. And we're going to have a discussion as to what is a business model so that we have an understanding of it. And it's extremely important that we all understand what is integrated reporting and what is business model, because from there we're going to answer 3 questions, and the 3 questions are listed here. So I'm going to do some annotation so that you can focus on the area. So these are the 3 questions I'm going to focus on today to help you as internal auditors to answer these 3 questions, or to audit this business model of your organization so that you're able to help the organization improve their business model. That's the main purpose of today's presentation, is to help you as internal auditors understand how to audit the business model over here. How to audit the business model of your organization. So our presentation is in 3 parts. Just let me clear this. These are the 3 parts of our presentation. And if you want to take a photo of this this screen here, this is the most important slide that we'll be using in the webinar today. The first question that we want to ask ourselves today, and for internal auditors, as you ask your business model, who believes in us? Who believes in us? And this is where we will focus on stakeholders. By understanding who believes in us, we will be able to see whether your business model is a viable business model. Now, this is going to be a very difficult question to ask for internal auditors because there are many stakeholders. But in today's presentation, we will understand who are your stakeholders. For example, your stakeholders will include your customers, your employees, your suppliers, your community, and your shareholders. So typically, these are the 5 stakeholders that we have facing the organization. The more that your stakeholders believe in you, and the more important that your business model will be able to survive even in a situation of a pandemic. So that's the first question that we will ask as part of our presentation. The second question is that here, part of our presentation will look at, do we know where to go and do we know how to get there? Do we know where to go and do we know how to get there? This is a second question that internal auditors need to ask of your business model. And the third question that you need to ask of your business model is, have we made a difference? I understand that for Indonesia, all companies have to do sustainability reporting. So this third question is an important part for your sustainability reporting, because for sustainability reporting, it is important to show whether you have made a difference for who, a difference for your stakeholders. So it links back to this first question. Who believes in us? The stakeholders. Have we made a difference to your stakeholders? So these 2 are linked together. That's why the arrows are here. And do you know where to go? This question is knowing where to go depends on what your stakeholders are. How to get there depends on whether you can make a difference or not. So this question here, do we know how to get there? if you know how to get there, you will make a difference. If you go to the right place, you will meet the expectations of your stakeholders. So these 3 questions for your as internal auditors will help you audit your business model. So we were using this diagram here again and again to emphasize the role of the internal auditors with regards to the business model. And the business model is a key part of the integrated reporting framework. Yeah. So I hope this sets the foundation from which you understand the presentation today. And I do encourage you to take photos of this screen. But nonetheless, all these slides will be made available to everybody after this presentation. So please take the photo of this. I'll just clear this drawing so that you can see a bit clearer. So these are the 3 questions as to how to audit the business model. But in addition to these 3 main questions, there'll be about another 15 more questions that I'll be sharing with you to guide you as internal auditors as to how to audit your business model. Now, I know that integrated reporting is not mandatory in Indonesia, but as you do your sustainability reporting, you will soon realize that sustainability reporting is really a kind of integrated report. So like it or not, you are already doing a integrated reporting by doing a sustainability report. So that's the basis. And where does the business model fit in? There are 8 components of making sure that you get the trust of your stakeholders. And the business model is one of the components. The other components that you're familiar with is risk management, long-term value creation, purpose, tone at the top, sustainability framework, corporate culture, and stakeholder engagement. So these are the 8 areas where we believe you will gain the trust of your stakeholders. And remember, there are 5 stakeholder groups. 1 is your customers, 2 is your employees, 3 is your suppliers, 4 is your community, and 5 is your shareholders. So how you engage with them is in this diagram here, stakeholder engagement. And of course, today we're focusing on business model. So hopefully in future webinars that perhaps you can hold with the IIA or other webinars that you attend in other organizations, understand how each of these components is a key part of trust. So when you audit the business model, the outcome of your report is really to gain the trust of your stakeholders. So this is a big picture focus. And now we will focus on what is integrated reporting. So remember 3 questions on business model. Business model is part of integrated reporting, and the whole thing is all leading to getting trust with your stakeholders. So these are the keywords that you need to remember as we go to this presentation today. And with that, I'll hand over to Ibu Erika to share with you what is integrated reporting. Erika?
Hello. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Professor Low. Yes, I'm very honored to be able to participate today in the online learning program for the IIA, and I would start off the presentation by also apologizing that my Indonesian is not great, even though I am Indonesian, and therefore I will be presenting this in English, especially the technical terms. I will definitely choke on that, but that's why we have Pak Rizki, right, to help out. And so I would like to start by introducing, integrated reporting in general. And if we can start with the poll questions, please. Pak Rizki, bisa dibantu? We have 2 poll questions that I'm hoping to get a response from the audience. And the first one is I'd like to know whether you have read the International Integrated Reporting Framework. And I'll give... Now I'll give you a few moments to answer.
70%.
It's up to 70%.
Yes.
Wait until
That's
72%. Yeah. 75. 70,
so
80.
the split, yeah.
Yeah.
The split is about 30-70, where 30% have read the International Integrated Reporting Framework. Okay, that's a good base for me to understand.
okay, Pak Rizky.
Okay. And pull it.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you, Pak Rizky.
Have the result.
So 30% of you have read the IIR framework, and I understand that it is not mandatory in Indonesia, while sustainability reporting is mandatory as of this year. But like Professor Law said, the integrated reporting is actually, if you are already doing sustainability reporting, you are already halfway through the journey of integrated reporting. And so we hopefully after this session, you have a better understanding of how to complete the journey. And Pak Rizky, if you don't mind taking the second poll question now, please.
Pak Pitoyo, boleh. Next. Next polling. Sorry. Okay.
Right. So the second question we have for you is, in your opinion, based on what you know about integrated reporting, how important do you think is integrated reporting for Indonesian companies and organizations in general? Okay, so based on those who knows about it, seems like we do have at least half of you think that is important for Indonesian companies.
Jadi saya tutup pollingnya.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Great. So I believe my understanding is that over half of you think that is important, and everyone who knows about integrated reporting thinks that it is relevant to Indonesian companies. And I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, Pak Rizky and Pak Pitoyo. So let me begin with those polls in mind. I would like to start the slide on the IR framework. Please, Uantchern, if you have control of the slides. Great. And thank you, Pak Pitoyo. Bisa ditutup itunya, polling question box-nya.
Silakan Ibu. Masih muncul ya?
Polling question-nya masih muncul, Pak.
Masih muncul. Di exit di sana nggak bisa Ibu.
Uantchern, are you able to close the poll box?
Pengembangan kompetensi. Oleh karena itu teman-teman sekalian, di dalam
Bisa ditutup masing-masing kok.
Struktur baru Kementerian Kesehatan, PPSDM kedepannya tidak lagi berupa badan, Dia ada merupakan satu.
Is it close?
Saya tolong di-mute.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you for taking the time, everyone, to answer the poll. So I would like to start with the definition of integrated reporting. And this is based on the International Integrated Reporting Framework. An integrated report is a concise communication about how an organization's strategy, governance, performance, and prospects lead to the creation of value over the short, medium, and long term. It is a principles-based framework, 19 to be exact, and producing one for the first time can be likened to walking into a minefield, can be scary. But it is important to view it as a journey, and no two organizations are the same, by the way. So it's remember that these principles in the framework are there to guide the organization, not to trip them up. And the focus is so that organizations can communicate their value creation. And as Mr. Uantchern has highlighted, is the creation of value that is the focus of the framework and the final goal here. And if you can go to the next slide, please, Professor. So after that long, complicated description, in short, an integrated report explains how an organization creates value over time. These principles are centered around the notion that value is not simply created by or within the organization alone. An organization exists with respect to its interactions with the external environment and their stakeholders. And these are the value itself is created through relationship by stakeholders and also dependent on various resources. And in the next slide, please, Professor, I would like to introduce a slide that Professor Lowe will later also delve into, putting integrated reporting in the context of all the other frameworks out there that you all might be familiar with. And also, this slide has been created by a colleague of mine at Blacksun, which helpfully try to summarize everything and put them in one slide. There's a lot of frameworks and alphabet soup of sometimes references, and it could be confusing, but I'm sure you are familiar with the GRI initiative, the Global Reporting Initiative. Now, the focus of GRI, as you all know, is remains on the sustainability reports that provide information that is material not just to investors but to all stakeholders. Now there's overlaps there with the integrated reporting because of the focus on stakeholders, but also for the IRC, the focus is on new integrated reports that concisely set out a holistic story about how the company creates value, again, in the short, medium, and long term, and only to the extent that it's material to the investors. So there's a little bit of materiality involved there as well. And again, probably the other side of this scale is the SASB that you all may also be familiar with, which the focus is first and foremost an increase in sustainability disclosures made in existing Form 10Ks. If you can see, sorry. Oh, okay. I think there was some background noise there. But if you can see in this framework, and again, Professor Lowe will explain further, is that SASB is mainly looking from outside in. and it focuses on how ESG issues impact the financial performance of the organization. GRI, on the other side, is inside out. It's a measure of how the organization's activities impact ESG and sustainability issues. And integrate reporting in the middle, because it focuses on how organization connects with their performance with purpose, actually serves as a good reporting framework that glue everything together. So even though integrated reporting is not mandatory, it is actually a good framework, yeah, that connects the two, and that's something that, the benefits of it I can describe in the next slides as well. Professor Low, if you want to click on to the next slide. So in the next couple of slides, I would like to bring up some case studies that are clients of ours at Black Sun. The first one is Coca-Cola HBC. Now, Coca-Cola HBC has been a client for 5 years now. It's the world's third largest Coca-Cola bottler, and they have successfully integrated 3 reports over the past 5 years. Their sustainability, annual, and financial reports into one integrated report and meeting listing requirements of the London Stock Exchange. Even though they are also reporting towards other frameworks like the GRI standard and the UN Global Compact, they are able to, we work with them in their journey and produce one integrated report. And they're award winning as well. They won awards such as the Financing for the Future Awards and the IR Society. And I encourage you all to check out their online annual report page, because they do a good job presenting their narrative digitally and combining the 3 reports into one integrated report. Next slide, please, Professor Low, for the second example. The second client success story that I would like to share is Olam International. Olam's been a client of ours for 4 years now. It is a leading food and agriculture business headquartered and listed in Singapore. It currently ranks among the top 30 largest listed companies in terms of market cap. They have a very strong sustainability reporting, which means they have already made quite a distance in their journey towards integrated reporting. And as Professor Low loves to say, you're already halfway through the journey, you may as well go all the way. And so we work with them to in their journey, conducting benchmarking, senior executive workshops, and briefings, all in this journey towards an integrated reporting strategy. And most recently, they've also won an award by the IR Society for most effective integration of sustainability into corporate communications. And so as we are, I'm aware Indonesia is now mandated to do sustainability reporting. And GRI is very compliance based, and sometimes what I feel is lacking is that it's not looked at holistic issue like value creation or long-term thinking, and therefore it's almost like not quite there yet when in terms of integrating all of the sustainability ideas into the thinking. And it's as if I can take you to the next slide, please, that would I would explain further about the benefits. Now, before I start this next slide, looking at the poll question number 2 about how important you think the integrated reporting is for Indonesian companies, I see that those that are aware are already on the boat about the importance. And as we can see on this chart here, the global adoption of integrated reporting has been on the rise. More organizations are adopting it worldwide. Already over 90% of global 250 companies are already reporting on sustainability. And our own research, Black Sun conducts an annual research every year, looking through the reporting of UK listed, FTSE 100 index companies, and we have found that I have just completed this research internally, and we are in the thick of preparing our webinars next. But our own research finds that already 91% of UK FTSE 100 companies refer to a sustainability framework, which is an upward trend since 2013, as you can see. And of course, Professor Loh later will also share some research from our Singapore office, specifically from the Southeast Asia market, comparing Malaysian and Singaporean companies, which should be interesting as well. Professor Loh, if you can take us to the next slide, please. And I would like to also highlight and hopefully answer some of the questions that you may already have, which is, what is the role of internal audit in integrated reporting? Where do I fit in all this? I'd like to start by saying that the two areas where internal audit can help would be risk management and governance. The forward-looking nature of integrated reporting, it presents the potential for internal audit to take a more strategic role in assessing the risk for an organization in the short, medium, and long term. So that's where you can help in the risk management bit. And also, from a governance point of view, the internal audit activity must assess and make appropriate recommendations for improving the governance process to determine if the organization's governance structure can support its ability to create value, again, in the short, medium, and long term. And over time, I would say that the evolution of internal audit's role in integrated reporting is as the diagram above. It starts from assurance, because initially internal audit may be called to provide assurance on non-financial metrics. And over time, the role of internal audit will likely to change to expand from primarily assurance role to an advisory role, providing recommendations in terms of enhancing the relevance and reliability of the related reports. Professor Loh, if you can take me to the next slide, please. So with these slides, the title of the slide says, why is integrated reporting relevant in times of pandemic? But really what I would like to cover is that the following slides details the benefit of integrated reporting that extends beyond crisis time, well into business as usual. Integrated reporting, the goal of it is long-term value creation. And it does so by promoting integrated thinking. That means it breaks down departmental silos within an organization. There's multiple departments working with an organization, and oftentimes they work autonomously and probably not talking as much with each other. And so promoting integrated reporting promotes integrated thinking within the organization, which leads to an improvement in understanding of stakeholders and the elements involved in the business, and also better understanding of outputs into the world and their impacts on it, which is the business model that Professor Loh is going to take us through later. And these are some of the stakeholders involved in a business, and employees, your investors, community, customers, consumers, and of course the business partners, and finally the regulators. And this takes us to the next slide, please, and highlighting the fact that in times of crisis, integrated thinking helps businesses in making critical decisions that supports long-term business sustainability, because externally integrated reporting articulates how a business creates value to stakeholders. Yeah, so towards moving towards investors, for example, they see a better business case when they are able to see the company, an organization's value creation story is communicated to them better. And so for investors, it leads to thinking that this organization has a good business case. Yeah. And from the consumers and customers' point of view, it garners trust. Obviously, in these times of crisis, it's key in maintaining a stable market base for when after the recovery time. And for regulators, again, the clarity of value creation that is communicated through integrated reporting is very important in getting the buy-in or the confidence for regulators to throw a lifeline if you are in need of help in times of a crisis. And in the next slide, which is also the final one, I'd like to just pull out a couple of examples from recent headlines, please, Professor Low. And these are, again, as I mentioned, about the regulators, about how Virgin Atlantic, for instance, was told to resubmit their bailout bid because they have failed to convince the UK Treasury that they have a sustainable business model and also are behaving responsibly recently. And Schroders, which is an investment investor, they demand executive pay cuts and share the pain. And this is all again scrutinizing the business model and saying that in times of crisis you need to look at all of your stakeholders and not just the shareholders. And during the pandemic, successfully highlighting the value that a business creates is key for weathering the storm. After the storm passes, businesses with solid business model who successfully garnered trust, again, we talked about trust earlier, from their stakeholders, will emerge stronger because they will get help, capital raising, they get support from regulators, and afterwards they retain their consumer base as well as their talent base as a result. And with that, I shall conclude my section by another poll, please, if Mr. Rizki can help with the third question. So given all that I've introduced to you about integrated reporting and what you know about it, what do you think is what prevents the adoption of IR in Indonesia, given that adoption based on the very first poll question is still quite low? And if you see the poll question, feel free to answer. Pak Rizki, apakah poll resultnya ada?
Ada 37%, 40%, still increase. Yep.
Vote berarti.
Nearly 50%. Kita tunggu 1 menit lagi, 1 minute.
Ya, boleh.
Split across all answer this result. Okay.
It's quite even, yeah?
Yes. So 59%. Bapak Ibu silakan.
Unvote Bapak Ibu.
Ya. Kita tunggu 10 detik lagi. Oke, masih ada Bapak Ibu? Ditunggu silakan. Oke, kita tutup pollingnya sebentar lagi. 5. Oke.
Makasih Pak Rizki. Sudah saya lihat poll resultnya. Jadi it's quite even, ya? About 30 to 40 across the board. List all of the issues that they think is preventing the adoption of integrated reporting. And all this to me just shows that again, I think as we gain more understanding, as more people gain a better understanding of integrated reporting, and again, I have to reiterate this, that it's not that far of a step to take from sustainability reporting. I think that people will be able to see better, again, all the benefits I've outlined of integrated reporting in terms of bringing integrated thinking from inside organizations and focusing on communicating how value is created from each organization to the external stakeholders. And with that, hence we are happy to bring to you the online learning experiences, and Professor Lowe is gonna take us through next the business model in detail, which is a key part, of course, of the integrated reporting process. Over to you, Uantchern.
Thanks, Ibu Erika. Thank you for the introduction to integrated reporting. So what I'm going to do now is to bring you back to the beginning, so that you're able to understand what the big picture is all about, and before we go into a bit more detail. Okay, if you look at this slide here, this is the overview slide that we presented before Ibu Erika presented a section on integrated reporting. So where does integrated reporting fit into this big picture here? And answer is here, trust. So the starting point when we talk about integrated reporting is IR is here. So this is what IR is all about. It's really ensuring that you gain trust with your stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? There are 5 stakeholders that we spoke about. One is your customer. Secondly is your employee. Third is your supplier. Fourth is your community. And 5 is your shareholder. So these are the 5 stakeholders that we spoke about, so that you gain trust with them. And how do you engage with them is covered in stakeholder engagement, so which we won't cover today in detail, but we'll cover a little bit of it. So the starting point when we talk about why do we want to do integrated reporting, the basis is getting trust with your stakeholders. So there are 5 stakeholder groups that we will speak about in a little while. And to gain trust with your stakeholders, you must make sure that you have a good corporate culture, which is here. We must have a good sustainability framework. So this is important area because in Indonesia, sustainability is important because it's mandatory for Indonesian companies, starting from this year onwards for all companies listed on the stock exchange. So this is SR. And Ibu Erika spoke about the few sustainability reporting frameworks. We talked about GRI, SASB, TCFD, EGs. We will speak about that one in this later section of my presentation. So this part will be very important to you because as internal auditors, you need to provide assurance for each of these areas. The tone at the top. So what our research shows that for integrated reporting to be successful, you need the support of the CEO and the chairman and the commissaries. So without the proper tone at the top, you won't be able to do a good integrated report and you won't be able to gain trust with your stakeholders. Purpose is linked to belief. Later on, when we look at what the first question for the business model, siapa yang percaya kita? So who believes in you is linked to purpose because purpose is belief. How do you create long-term value? So even with the pandemic, after the pandemic, can you still create value for the organization? It's linked to trust. And another last area is risk management. As internal auditors, all of us are familiar with risk management, but you can't do risk management by itself. So risk management must be linked to trust here. And finally, we talk about the business model for today's presentation. So as you can see from this diagram, you realize that actually for integrated reporting, there are 8 components to the integrated report. And for each of these 8 areas, the role of the internal auditor is to provide assurance, to provide advisory. So one of the questions that I see here now is like, how about the advisory role of for internal auditors? So for each of these 8 components here, the internal auditors will have both the assurance and advisory role. I know you're will be concerned about independence. Can you provide assurance and independence? So to me, assurance and independence is really a state of mind. And it is along that continuum that the internal auditors need to balance it so that you have both assurance and advisory role to the organization. You can't give just assurance all the time. So it's important that for internal auditors, all of you in attending this session here, is to gain that knowledge. So based on the first poll, only 70% of you, 70% of you have not read the IR framework. So it is important for you to read the IR framework. And that's your first homework after. So after this presentation at noontime, when you go for lunch, please download the IR framework that was issued in 2013 December. It's going to be revised this year in December 2020. So it's a relatively new framework. Please do read it. It's not very long. I think it's about 50 pages. It's principle-based. It's very, very important that you read it. I think it's available in Bahasa. But if you don't understand IR as a framework, as a way of thinking, then you won't be able to have a good foundation to earn the trust of your stakeholders. So in summary, trust is all about your integrated reporting. There are 8 components. Today, we're covering only 1 component, a little bit of some of the rest. We cover a little bit of stakeholders, cover a little bit of culture, we cover a little bit of SR, and the rest we'll leave it for another day. But this is really the big picture. So let me clear this drawing here for you to take a picture of this diagram, because it is a key part of gaining trust with your stakeholders in organization. So remember, there are five stakeholders that we will speak about today. And these 5 are, once again, your customers, your employees, your suppliers, your community, and your shareholders. And when you engage with these stakeholders, you understand their purpose or what they believe in you. The more they believe in you, the more your business model will work. So with this big picture in mind, let me go down to the bit more detail. So we look at business model. So this is the big picture here. Oops, let me go back. Yeah. So I know that some of the questions being asked by the participants is IR mandatory in Indonesia? It's not mandatory, but as you saw the big picture diagram, sustainability reporting is mandatory, but SR is one part of IR. So when you do SR, you're already halfway doing IR. So in a way, IR is mandatory because you are doing SR as a part of the mandatory requirement of in Indonesia. In Malaysia, it is quite interesting to note that in Malaysia, SR is mandatory, IR is mandatory. So in Malaysia, there are many good integrated reports that you can look at. And I think it's probably the closest that in terms of good reference points, besides the UK, I think in Malaysia is a good reference point to look at how they do integrated report, because their integrated report is a combined report. It combines the annual report and the sustainability report. So here, the big picture is integrated report. Integrated report has 8 components, and one of the components is the business model. And what is the role of internal auditors with regards to the business model is to answer 3 questions. So your role is to provide both assurance and advisory on the business model by answering these 3 questions. So your internal audit checklist, which internal auditors are familiar with, your checklist should have these 3 questions. Siapa yang percaya kepada kita, who believes in us, and who believes in us are your 5 stakeholders. So here, you have 5 stakeholder groups. So as internal auditors, you need to speak to these 5 stakeholder groups: your customers, your employees, your suppliers, your community, and finally your shareholders. The more that your stakeholders believe in you, the stronger is your business model. So the first question is that who believes in us, and it's linked to purpose, it's linked to stakeholder engagement. The second question that you need to ask is that, do we know where to go? And do we know how to get there? Because if you don't, then you get lost. The Malay word is sesat. I think, I'm not sure whether it is the right word in Bahasa Indonesia, but you're lost. If you're lost, then how do you get to where you want to go? And what it means is that you cannot achieve the objectives of your organization. The business model would not work. And where do you want to go and how to get there depends on the 5 stakeholder groups. So these stakeholders will tell you where to go so that you know how to get there. And if you know how to get there and you will make a difference, and you can make a difference, it means that you have gone to the right place. So 3 questions that internal auditors will provide assurance on and provide advice on. One is who believes in us. 2, where do we want to go and do we know how to get there? And third question is, have we made a difference? So the first part is on stakeholder engagement. The second part is on strategy. And the third part is on sustainability reporting. So the third part here, making a difference, is linked to sustainability reporting. So whether you use GRI or SASB or TCFD, is linked to sustainability. So let me clear this diagram here. So this is drilling down deep into the business model. Very deep, very detailed. And these 3 checks, so the first homework that you need to do today is to download the IR framework and read all the pages of it, the 2013 December version. The next version coming out is this December. Look out for that. It's not a major change, but you need to wait for that in December to download that. But so that's the first homework. The second homework is that in your internal audit checklist, put down these 3 questions. Who believes in us? Do we know where to go? Do we know how to get there? And have we made a difference? Very difficult questions to answer, but it's important to make sure that you create value for the organization. So there's one question from the participant that says, what does value means in the context of integrated reporting? Can it be measured and quantified? So value is created by these 3 questions. If these 3 question answer is no, then you have not created value for the organization because your business model does not work. Your business model has failed. So this is drilling down into the details. And this is a big picture. So the 3 questions here that we are focusing on today is the 3 questions. Sorry, it's very difficult to write with a mouse, but so we're looking at the 3 questions for today's presentation, which is part of your business model, which is part of your integrated reporting. This is SR, so SR is mandatory. Risk management, we all know as internal auditors, we audit the risk management framework. So ISO 31000, COSO, impact likelihood, we are very familiar with risk management. But you know that there are 7 other components which link to trust. So your IR contains 8 components here to gain trust with your stakeholders. So there are 5 stakeholders, groups, 3 questions on business model. Business model is linked to IR, which Ibu Erika has covered. And SR is mandatory in the Indonesian context. So I hope with that, you're able to see in your mind that big picture, how it's all linked together. And so currently you are missing this part. So only 30% of you have read the IR framework. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with risk management here. So as internal auditors, knowledge is important. So your homework, once again, download the IR framework, read it. And what we hope to do is to achieve 100% all of you to be familiar with the IR framework. Because if you're not familiar with the IR framework, then how can you achieve a good SR? Because SR is part of IR and risk management is part of IR. So for all the dots to connect, IR is a key component of understanding how you gain trust with your 5 stakeholder groups, and answering these questions, 3 questions is important. So I hope that is quite clear in everybody's perspective as to how it all fits together. There's a quick question here. Explanation IR rule. So we talk about quantitative data, whether you need to collect data. I think it's important that internal auditors be able to collect data. How do you measure each of these areas? Like for example, under sustainability framework, you need to gather data to ensure that you're able to do it on a sustainability basis or sustainable basis. So data gathering, data analytics is another skill that internal auditors need to have to play the assurance and advisory role for each of these areas here. So Erika has covered what is integrated reporting. So I hope that what she has covered is only a very brief introduction to integrated reporting. And once you get the slides, download the IR framework. Once again, I know I'm repeating myself. So this is what the IR framework looks like. It's about 50 pages. Talk about value creation. I'll cover this diagram in more detail and under the 3rd question, have we made the difference? Many of you will be familiar with GRI, the data gathering framework. So one of your questions is how do you focus on data? So data gathering is under the framework of GRI, but GRI is part of IR. IR is part of UN SDGs, UN Global Compact and PRI. So these 3 big picture areas here, let me just go into here and annotate. Just let me cover it quickly here. So you look at these 17 UN SDGs. It all must lead to the end game here, which is really the social aspiration. So it all starts with the detail at the bottom, like IR, GRI, SSB, TCFD, CDP. So a lot of these acronyms here, we're all familiar with in one way or the other, but ultimately, where does it link to? Is really the social aspiration. What do we want to hope the community to do in achieving the 17 UN SDG goals? Quick question, any real example of IA deliverables with regard to integrated reporting? Well, your deliverable is really the assurance to make sure that all the items in your integrated report complies with the IR framework. So the IR framework becomes your benchmark. Let me clear this drawing here. So Ibu Erika, look at two examples of a good integrated report, the Coca-Cola Hellenic Bottling Company and Olam. So Olam is a good example because it's an agriculture-based organization, and Indonesia has many agriculture-based organizations. So Olam, in fact, does a full integrated report, and they combine the integrated report, they combine the annual report, the strategy report, the financial report, and the sustainability report into one integrated report. And they've done it for the last 4 years, and it has won many, many prizes in Singapore, in the UK. So I will encourage you to download the OLAM integrated report because it is a good framework to use to understand what's the best practice with regards to integrated report. And the role of the internal auditor is to provide assurance and to provide advice to the top management as to how to achieve a good integrated report. And the outcome of a good integrated report is trust. How do you gain trust with us? Again, the five stakeholder groups that you engage with. 5 stakeholder groups. So I'll repeat myself again so that everybody gets it. I know you think that I'm repeating too much, but it's important. It's really important that you understand that the start of everything is who believes in you. Siapa yang percaya pada kita. So the 5 stakeholder groups: customer, employee, supplier, community, and your shareholder. So there are 5. So with that as a big picture, we now start my section here as to what is the business model. So I will go through this relatively quickly because I will expect you to read the IR framework after this at lunchtime. So at lunchtime when you're eating your lunch, make sure that you download and read the IR framework while you're eating your lunch. And this is the definition of a business model. This is from the IR framework. So this is their standard definition. What is a business model? A business model comprises your inputs, activities, outputs and outcomes. So if you are a plantation, your outputs will be your products, but the key outcome is really trust. When you have a good business model, the outcome that you will generate is trust. A business model must have a strategic purpose. So strategy is where do you want to go and how to get there. So strategy is really linked to the second question for the business model. Where do we want to go and how do we get there? And finally, the business model is all about how do you create value. How to create value for who is linked to the first question, creating value for your stakeholders, and making sure that you make a difference, which is linked to your third question. So outcome is trust. Activities and inputs are the things that you do. Strategy is where do you want to go and how to get there. And creating value is for make sure that you create value for the right stakeholders and making a difference. Because if you don't make a difference, then you don't create value. Whether it's a short, medium, or long term, it doesn't matter. Once you don't create value or you don't meet the expectations of your stakeholders, then your business model does not work. So there's a question on how do you correlate, how do you have a positive correlation between the value of the shares and the trust of the investors? Well, there's been a lot of research done. If you Google research on the share price and integrated reporting or the value of companies, it's been shown and proven to be very clear that companies who are able to show value through integrated report is directly correlated to the share price of the organization. So there have been research done in Singapore, in Malaysia, I think in UK, that the more transparent you are in terms of doing a combined or integrated report, and also sustainability report. In fact, it's conclusively proven that sustainability report leads to better understanding of organizations and lead to better share price and valuation of the organization. So whether it's value creation, share price is important. So without a doubt, the tone at the top need to understand that by being more transparent, by gaining trust, is directly correlated to the share price of the organization. So there is a financial incentive to do integrated report. So within the company, there's a question within the company, who should initiate integrated report? So to me, it's very clear. integrated report must be initiated by the CEO and the chairman of the board. The tone at the top. So we understand that there are 8 components to integrated reporting. The tone at the top is important. So IR is a top-down driven initiative, not bottom-up, top-down. The tone at the top must be extremely important. And it is important for the tone at the top to understand what the stakeholders want. And for me, I've seen that for IR, even SR must be initiated by the tone at the top. So if SR is driven by a function or the department at the bottom, it will not work. It will become a report that is not used and will not gain trust with your stakeholders. So this is a definition of a business model. This is a standard definition. And when the IR framework is revised by this December, this definition of business model will not change. So it will still remain the same. So don't worry when you download the December 2013 version. So this is the standard version. It's still good. I think it's still relevant, and you should adopt this for your organization. So use this as the definition for the business model in an organization. Do share this with your strategic department. If I can summarize the business model, we have a long definition, but this is an example of a business model here. What is a business model? So very simply, example of a business model is that you buy low and you sell high. So that's a very good example of a simple business model. So there are many business models around the world, but this is a good example for you to understand that a business model doesn't have to be complex. In fact, all business models boils down to this basic business model. The business model is to buy low, sell high, you make a profit, and that's it. So this is a business model. A business model, once again, does not have to be complex. And in fact, all business models will basically look like this, no matter what you call it. I'll give you a minute to understand this diagram here. Now, this diagram is from the IR framework. This is in the IR framework, the May 2020 draft framework. So this diagram is an updated one. So when you download the 2013 framework, this will not be there, but this one will be in the 2020 draft framework. So you can see at the bottom here. So when you do the Google, make sure that it's a May 2020 consultation draft framework. So by December this year, we hope that this diagram will be completed and will be adopted. So if you want to draw a business model, this is the diagram that the IR framework recommends. So you have your inputs here. So all these are your inputs or resources that you use. These are your inputs. These are your outputs here. You have your activities leading to the outputs. And then you have your how you perform, what's the business outlook, what are the strategies, where do you want to go and how to get there. You're familiar with governance. You're familiar with risks and opportunities. Every company have a vision. And the purpose is new. In the 2013 IR framework, it does not have the word purpose in there, but the 2020 draft has the word purpose. Now, what is purpose? Purpose is equal to belief. Who believes in us? And this one is linked to the 5 stakeholder groups. So does a customer believe in you? Does an employee believe in you? Does a supplier believe in you? Does a community believe in you? And does a shareholder believe in you? If they believe in you, then your business model works. Then you have the right purpose, because the purpose is your why. So purpose is your why. Why do you do what you do? The why. So why do I want to serve my customer? Why do I want to serve my employee? Why do I want to serve my supplier? Why do I want to serve my community? And why do I want to serve my shareholder? If you don't serve them, you have no purpose. And companies with no purpose will have a failed business model. The business model will have failed if they don't have the right purpose. So please understand this diagram. This is an important diagram in order to help you draw your business model. Now, there are many ways to draw the business model. This is only one way. There's no rules to say that you must draw your business model in this way, but this gives you a good starting point, especially how the various components link together. So once again, this is inside the May 2020 consultation draft that was issued just last month. Important diagram here in relation to the definition of the business model. So purpose is new. How many types of business models are there? 1, 2, 10, 20. I think the more important question to ask is how many stars are there in the whole universe? How many stars are there in the whole universe? I wouldn't do a poll here, but just a guess. Is it 1 billion, 10 billion? How many stars are there in the universe? Well, the answer is that there's 1 billion trillion stars in the observable universe. And we all know that the universe is expanding every day as we speak. So every day there's more and more stars being added. So only 1 billion trillion is only the lowest, probably lowest estimate. So there are many stars out there in the universe. And the reason why I wanted to share with you is that there are many, many types of business models. So here I did a Google and I found that there's at least 50 business models out there. And all of them have very different words to describe them in terms of the business model. But the advice I want to give to you is that don't be too excited with the names of the business model, but more importantly is to understand what are the components of the business model. And we look at the 3 questions. There are 3 questions to understand the business model. Does it meet the expectations of your stakeholders? Meaning that who trusts, who believes in you, siapa percaya kepada kita. So the business model for it to work must answer these 3 questions. Who believes in us? Do you know where to go and how to get there? And finally, have we made a difference? So no matter what the names of the business model, if they cannot answer these 3 questions, then the business model does not work. So don't do too much research on the types of business model because there are many, many types of business model. What's more important is that does it answer the 3 questions? So here we have all these the latest business models. They call it the business model of the sharing economy. So whether it's Uber, Airbnb, Facebook, Instagram, Netflix, Alibaba, they all have become popular in what we call the sharing economy. But we all know that now today, the sharing economy cannot share anymore because of the pandemic. So does it mean the business models have failed? So it's not the business model that have failed. It's because you cannot meet the expectations because your stakeholders don't believe in you anymore because they cannot share. Once they cannot share with each other, the sharing economy doesn't work anymore. Then it's time for the business model to move on. So the business model is not effective anymore because the situation has changed. So then the next question that you would like to ask is that, do business models last forever? And the answer very clearly is the answer is no. I truly believe that business models will not last forever. It will last whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. It will still continue, but there is a finite term. There's a finite time limit, I believe, based on what I understand, based on my research that I've done. There's a finite time for the survivability of the business model. So if you keep on asking these 3 questions on your business models, you soon realize that once it doesn't answer this question, the business model is no longer viable. So last month, there was a news article here that says that some business models will not survive post-pandemic, and it's true. So restaurants, theaters, sporting events, they're particularly vulnerable because they depend on large crowds. So once you don't have large crowds anymore, who are large crowds? Crowds are your customers, they are your stakeholders. So they are your first stakeholder that you're focusing on. Large crowds are your stakeholders. Number one stakeholder, if you cannot meet the expectations of stakeholders, if the stakeholders don't believe in you anymore, then your business model is no longer viable. Then you need to change. So business models work when the stakeholders believe in you. So another article just came out also just this month. I think it was in June. I think this article was in 2 weeks ago in the Business Times. Doubts have crept up about the ride-hailing business model. So the ride-hailing business model and whether investors will continue pumping in massive funds into these startups. So even before the pandemic, Grab, Gojek, Uber, and Lyft were operating at a steep loss. So the business model was already questionable even before the pandemic. So if you look at the 3 questions that you're going to ask of the business model of the ride-hailing model, does it work? And it's a very interesting question. Does it work? It's already operating at a steep loss, so we wouldn't help answer the question for the first one. For shareholders, expect a positive returns on the investment. So business model, once again, will not survive, will not last forever. And it is a role of internal auditors to help understand whether the business model is survivable or not by answering the 3 questions. So the pandemic has shocked Grab's business model of burning money, the practice of putting more money than the business than expected return to build a customer base to earn the profits later. So here, you look at it, does it create long-term value? It creates long-term value only based on expectation that it can burn more money. But the pandemic has shocked it. So already the business model is questionable for the ride-hailing model of Grab. So it's not just Grab, but restaurants, cinemas, theaters, even universities. If you Google universities, a lot of people are questioning a lot of universities. In fact, just 2 nights ago, I was watching a documentary that it's expected that about 300 universities in the US will close down. Why? Because their business model is not sustainable anymore. So business models, once again, does not last forever. And for companies to keep on being successful, it is important to keep on improving and keep on assessing and evaluating, providing assurance on the business model. So all internal auditors in this webinar here, it is important that you provide assurance on the business model because it is important and ensure that the business model works. So let's do a poll here as to do we understand the business model of my own company? Do you understand your business model?
Berapa persen Pak Rizki?
Ya, silakan Bapak Ibu. 43%, 44%, ya 50%.
Tahan Bapak Ibu.
So this is a good percentage. Over 90% so far understand the business model.
Yes.
So I think it's overwhelming. I think this is a very positive poll that everybody, almost everybody in this webinar understand their company's business model. So you have a good starting point. Once you understand the business model, then the way that you audit the business model is a smoother path for you.
Silakan yang belum, Bapak Ibu. Kita tutup 10 detik lagi.
So while we're waiting for the poll to end, let me answer some questions that we have in the group chat. Is it important to apply value-based management before applying integrated report? And the answer is totally yes. In fact, in the Singapore Code of Corporate Governance, it is important to link remuneration to value. So a lot of companies in Singapore now is required before to link value creation to the pay of the executive. So the salaries of the executive is linked to value creation. It's difficult, but in the 2018 Singapore Code, it's important. It's why it's mandatory to link value creation to remuneration, to salaries. So value-based management is becoming more and more important. What are the steps and considerations should be taken by organizations to implement IR? Like I said, the first step is really to ensure the support from the board and from the chairman and from the CEO. It's important to get the support from the top. There's a question here, a comment. Disagree with the facts because humans need social, and unless we become more individualistic in the future. So I think the facts are reacting to the current situation of the pandemic. And I truly believe I also agree with you that humans are more social and we need to come together. But does it mean that business models, they can fail, they can come back successfully, they can fail, they can come back successfully? Social in nature and not individualistic. So things like sporting events, cinemas will come back, will go back. But then if you look at it, if you have a cinema and the cinema's business model is disrupted by a pandemic because we cannot come together, but we are more social. And so cinemas shut down for a little while. But remember, at the same time, there's this business model called the Netflix. So Netflix allows us to be social at the same time, but where? At home. So if you look at the cost benefit of Netflix and the cinemas, they're disrupted by a pandemic. So cinemas closed. Because we cannot go, but we are social in nature. But when cinemas reopen, do people go back to the cinemas anymore? I don't know. Because Netflix, if they say I give you lower price, Netflix say partner with IKEA. If Netflix partner with IKEA and provide cheap good furniture to everybody, if you're a member of Netflix, so that combination of business model will completely disrupt the cinemas totally. So from being individual to social and social to individual, it doesn't matter anymore because Netflix will outmaneuver the cinemas. And what will happen to cinemas if you are comfortable at home, you have good screen, or even if Netflix combined with a speakers company like, I don't know, I'm not totally familiar with speakers like sound system companies. So if companies like Netflix combined with IKEA, combined with a sound system company and help build a good cinema in your home for an affordable price, that will completely disrupt the cinemas, the theaters, and they will go out of business. So whether you're social or individual or otherwise, business model will keep on changing.
Professor Low.
Yeah.
If I can comment on that a little bit, I do feel that the business model is disrupted at the moment, especially because there's a lack of trust. Yeah, and people are not trusting to be packed in together, be close with other people because of the coronavirus, right? And one way I think for these companies, cinemas and ride sharing, if they want to get back up, they need to repair their customers, their stakeholders, hygienic level. You have to make sure that your customers trust you enough that if I get into this cab, that it is sufficiently sanitized and I trust that I will be safe and healthy if I enter the cinema. If that is somehow achieved, then there is there's saving grace. Yeah.
Thanks, Erika, for the comment. So maybe with that, I'm not saying a business model is right or wrong. If it's only right when it's right, it's wrong when it's wrong. If you know what I mean. And business model will keep on evolving, and that's why the role of the internal auditors will never stop. So internal auditors, beyond looking at the payroll, looking at purchases, looking at sales, looking at the internal controls, what are the controls over the business model to make sure that it continues to be viable? And I'm glad to know that over 90% of you understand your company's business model. So once you understand them, then how do you audit it? By using these questions. Do our stakeholders believe in us? Secondly, do we even know where we need to go and how to get there? And thirdly, have we made a difference? So by answering these questions, you're able to then provide assurance and advice to the management whether your business model is viable or not. So let me answer one more question in the comment section here. Who is in charge of preparing the IR? Once again, I believe that the person in charge is the CEO and the board and the chairman. And because one of the principles of integrated reporting is integrated thinking. So everybody must be involved in preparing the integrated report, not just corporate communications or investor relations or finance department. So everybody must be involved, including the CEO, CFO, CRO, the chief auditor. So everybody must be involved. That's my experience. I've done a lot of integrated reporting. I've done about 20 or 30 already, at least. And that's always been my experience. Everybody must be involved. Who decides what material information must be reported in IR? So the team will decide. How is data quality measured and evaluated? This is really the role of the internal auditor to make sure that the information in the integrated report is reliable. For IA personnel, what qualifications are needed to assure a good IR? I think all kinds of qualifications, including reading the IR framework. I think that's one important qualification, that you must be familiar, understand the IR framework. The question how is there an FSA or central bank who has IR? I think you look at the World Bank. The World Bank has adopted integrated reporting. Black Sun is helping the World Bank in doing their first integrated report. In Malaysia, it is mandatory for banks to adopt TCFD, which is the Task Force for Climate Change for Financial Disclosure. And TCFD is part of sustainability reporting, which is part of integrated reporting. So already central banks are adopting a lot of things which are related to integrated reports. How can it be implemented in an organization that is not a company? There are many non-profit organizations who have adopted integrated reporting, including the IR Council. So the Integrated Reporting International Council, the IRRC, has their own integrated report. The Malaysian Institute of Accountants have their own integrated report. I think many non-profit organizations have integrated reporting. So if you Google Black Sun's best practice database on integrated report, this database is located in the IR website. And this best practice database has examples of non-profit organizations which have integrated report, and these are not companies. So IR applies to both listed companies, non-listed companies, NGOs. So World Bank has it, associations have it. So don't be constrained to listed organizations. So maybe Erika, if you can Google the IR best practice database that Black Sun has with the IR, you can share in a group chat so everybody can have it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So now we go into the details. So big picture is that we understand that there are 8 components of trust. One of the 8 components is a business model. And for the business model to work, we answer 3 questions. So now we're going to these 3 detailed sections. So this is where the exciting part begins. This is where it becomes very, very detailed, but we have gotten the big picture already. We understand what is IR. We understand what is the business model. We understand that there are 3 questions. So from big to medium, now we're focusing on the 3 little balls here. And let's start with the first ball. Siapa yang percaya pada kita? Who believes in us? We believe that there are 5 stakeholder groups that believes in us. 1, customer. 2, employee. 3, your community. 4, your supplier. And 5, your shareholder. So there are 5 groups that you need to look at. And if these 5 groups believes in you, then you have achieved your purpose. So remember, in the business model diagram, purpose is about your why. Why do you do the things that you do? Why? You do it to meet the expectations of your stakeholders. And if you meet the expectations of a shareholder, then they will believe in you. They won't believe in you if you don't meet their expectations. So the first section, who believes in us here? In August of 2019, so just last year, this organization called the Business Roundtable. The Business Roundtable is an organization of 200 companies in the US. It's an organization that 200 companies are member of in the US. And the CEOs of this organization called the Business Roundtable made an announcement in August of last year. So you go to this link here. So this link here will link you to the article. It's an important article to read because this article is an important announcement to say that shareholder value is not the main focus of the company. So it drops the notion that for shareholders, to serve shareholders and to maximize profits is not the main thing. It is one of the things that the organization will do, but it's not the only thing. And also this is important. So how do you create value for the organization? You can't create value if you only focus on one stakeholder, so which is a shareholder. So remember, shareholders, they want profits, they want dividends, they want share price to go up. That's the value that they want from you. So that's their definition of value. But the Business Roundtable group say that no more. Not only shareholder, but the other 5 stakeholder groups. You must serve your employee, you must serve your customer, you must serve your supplier, you must serve the community and the shareholder. So shareholder is not the only one anymore. You must serve the 5 stakeholder groups. So this is a very important part in order to drive the purpose of your integrated report. So your integrated report must serve the purpose of 5 stakeholder groups. Thanks, Erika, for sharing the link to the best practice database. So look at your chat group now and go to the link. So Erika has provided a link to the best practice integrated reports that is captured all the integrated reports all around the world. This is done by Black Sun together with the IR Council, IR International Council. A quick question on business model. Do we assess the business model related to the struggle on this pandemic era and whether it works satisfactorily or not? So I guess the question is how often must you audit the business model? So my personal recommendation is that the business model needs to be audited at least once a year. The business environment now is so volatile. It changes very, very quickly. But I think 1 year is probably a good time. And within that 1 year, when do you audit it? I think you audit it when the company does its strategic review. I think companies do a strategic review every year, and the internal auditor should be part of the strategic review by providing your advice, your advice part for the business model. So this is where you are at the discussion with the strategy group, the CEO and the board. So at this slide here, when you get it, in fact, you should share with your strategy group and your CEO, because then they will understand the role of the internal auditor with regards to providing assurance and advice with regards to the business model. So let me clear this diagram here. So who are your 5 stakeholder groups? Customers, employees, suppliers, communities, and finally, the shareholder. We believe in delivering value to customers. What is value to customers? Things like a safe product, a useful product, a reliable product. These are value. So these are the expectation of the customers. Customers expect your product to be safe, useful, reliable. So this is the concept of the value or expectation of the customer. Employees, what do employees expect? What do employees want from you? What do they believe in you? They believe that you invest in them in training, in good salaries, in safe jobs, in mental health, in reasonable working hours, in upgrading, in promotion, in taking care of their family, making sure that when they terminate you, is a fair termination. So we must understand that not everybody will fit in the organization. It's fine, it's okay, but there must be fair termination. So these are the things that employees must believe, percaya pada kantor. So you must believe in the organization. Dealing fairly ethically with suppliers. So here, it is really, do suppliers believe that you have a fair tendering process, procurement process, that you will issue the procurement in a fair price, reasonable price, fair payment terms, good credit terms. So supporting your community, what does support mean? Means that the community will believe that you don't poison their rivers, their water, you don't emit pollution, you provide the good CSR. That's part of supporting the community. And finally, the long-term value for your shareholders. What's long-term value? Share price, dividends, profits. So this is what shareholders want. So for each of these 5 stakeholder groups, customers, employees, suppliers, communities, shareholders, each of them have different belief. Kepercayaannya tidak sama kepada semua-semuanya stakeholders. So because they have different beliefs. And when they have different beliefs, they have different expectations. So it's important that you meet the expectations, and once you meet the expectations, they will believe in you. And once they believe in you, you have served the purpose of meeting the expectations. And that answers the first questions. Do they believe in you? Do our stakeholders believe in you? So this is an important checklist from you. Remember, there are 8 components to building trust in organizations. One of the components is business model, which we're discussing today. The second component that we did talk about is on stakeholder engagement. So the important question is to understand how and what they believe in you, you must engage with them. So engaging with them means you must talk to them, meet with them, understand with them what their expectations are, what do they want to believe in you. So stakeholder engagement is a key part of your integrated report, and it's a key part of making sure that they trust you. So in integrated reporting in a new era, all this engagement got to be redone all over again because expectations, beliefs will completely change. Do they believe that you provide a safe environment in the pandemic? Do they believe that you continue to provide value? So it's important that internal auditors get involved in stakeholder engagement, which is another topic altogether. In fact, that's another 2-hour webinar on stakeholder engagement. So just this slide alone, we have a 2-hour webinar that we can focus and share with internal auditors how you engage with your stakeholders. So let me clear this so that you can take a screenshot of this. So in answering your 3 questions to your relevance of your business model, you need to look at these 5 stakeholder groups. So this, as you know, this Bundaran HI. So if you look at your stakeholders, there are internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. So the external stakeholders are the one in orange, the suppliers, your shareholders, your customers, your community, and their internal stakeholders, management, the board, employees. So there can be more than 5 stakeholder groups. So these 5 stakeholder groups that is announced by the Business Roundtable are just 5. You can have 5, you can 10, you can 20. It doesn't matter. But more importantly, are you able to identify who they are and how important they are to you in making sure that your business model is viable? So the first question is that, do these stakeholders believe in you? And making sure that they're all in the same direction. So you can see Bundaran HI is all over the place. Suppliers going this way, employees going that way, the board going towards the circle, the community going the same direction, but management and customers are going in a different direction, and shareholders is going in a different direction. So how do you bring them all together so that they all come to the same business model? And that's the role of answering the first question. Do the shareholders, do the stakeholders believe in us? do the stakeholders believe in us? So as the role of the internal auditors is to audit stakeholder engagement, to make sure that everybody understands where they're going and we understand how do we meet the expectations. And in meeting the expectations, we serve the purpose of the organization. Now let's end the first section with a poll. Who are your most important stakeholders? You can choose more than one. Who are your most important stakeholders? And this will then determine how much effort you will spend in auditing which stakeholders believe in you more.
Ya, silakan Bapak Ibu. 30%.
I think we got about 1 more hour to go for the presentation. Well, that's very interesting. Over 70% of you believe that the customer is the most important stakeholders. Followed by employees. And only half of the votes go to shareholders. So that's interesting. This is a very exciting results here. So then my question to you is that how much time do you spend with your customers in understanding as internal auditors? How much time do you spend in understanding what the customers' expectations are, and how do you ensure that they believe in you, and how does that link to the purpose of our organization, and how does doing what you do, making sure that your business model meet the expectations of the customer. So this is a key revelation. I think this is very important. This is a very exciting result, that it tells you that internal auditors need to spend more time in auditing the customers to understand what they believe in you, and linking that to your business model. Because if what they believe in you is not addressed by your business model, it means that your business model is not viable. This is really exciting result. 78% chose customer as opposed to 53%. I think suppliers are very important. So only 20% chose suppliers, but it's okay, it doesn't matter. But nonetheless, I think this is a very exciting poll results. So I think probably one of the training that you need to think about, or one of the focus in your internal audit checklist, is to say, how much time have you spent on looking at the expectations of the customer as a stakeholder, important stakeholder group? So 78% chose customers. Wow. This is totally unexpected to me. I would thought that most of you would choose shareholders, but instead shareholder is rank number 3. Rank lowest is suppliers. Exciting results, very exciting results. Okay, in addition to the top question as to who believes in us, I've shared, take a screenshot of this. So this is a checklist for internal auditors for you to answer, for you to ask. You got to ask, is there a full-time stakeholder engagement function? Who talks to these 5 stakeholder groups? So who talks to the customers? Who audits the customers? Who audits the employees? Who audits the suppliers? Who audits the community? Who audits the shareholders? By auditing, meaning that who talks to them to understand what they believe in you, what's the expectation, how is it linked to the purpose of the organization, and then by default, how does it support your business model? So is there a full-time engagement function? Is there a chief stakeholder engagement officer? So if you have nobody talking to the stakeholders, what it means is that nobody understands what their expectations are, nobody understands what their beliefs are. I know you won't have the answer straight away, but this is really to raise your understanding as to what are the challenges in auditing business models. So it's not just answering siapa yang percaya pada kita, but is there a full-time stakeholder engagement function? Do your stakeholders really understand your business model? So based on the earlier poll, 90% of you understand your business model, which is good. But do all your stakeholders understand your business model? Because if they don't understand your business model, it means that your business model is not viable. So how do you make sure that your stakeholders really understand your business model? So a lot of shareholders, for example, they put money in your company, but they don't understand the business model. And when the company fails, they will blame the company. But more importantly, in the first place, did they really understand your business model? And then the third question that internal auditors or the company need to ask is that, is there commitment to action plans based on the feedback from stakeholders? So when the stakeholders give you feedback, when you engage with them, do you have an action plan based on the feedback from stakeholders? Because you don't have an action plan, it means that the feedback has not been taken into account. It means that the stakeholders may not believe in you. If they don't believe in you, then really your business model will not be viable. So very detailed 3 questions here. Still 3 questions to support the main question. And this main question is to support your business model. And the business model is a key part of IR. And IR is to gain trust. And we know that there are 8 components of trust, including stakeholder engagement. So stakeholder engagement is one of the 8 components of trust. So you can start to see they're all interlinked. So business model is one component of integrated reporting. Stakeholder engagement is another component. So business model is linked to stakeholder engagement. It's linked to integrated reporting. It's linked to trust. So I hope that now the big picture that we shared earlier on, now we go into so this is really the most detailed level that we can go to. And the 3 questions here is linked to the main question, is linked to the business model, is linked to IR, is linked to trust, and it's linked back to stakeholder engagement. So they're all linked together. And by now, you would have a good framework to think about how it's all intertwined together and how it's linked to the role of the internal auditor as providing assurance for each of these areas, and then providing advice on all this area. And at the end of the day, how it all links to creating value for the organization, for the stakeholders also. So if you want to take a picture of this, please do, because this one is we have gone from the big picture to now to the very detailed and how it's all linked. So the first homework, remember, is to read the IR framework. That's very important. So today lunchtime, read your IR framework. So we covered the first question, siapa yang percaya pada kita? Who believes in us? Who believes in us is linked to what the expectations are of the 5 stakeholder groups. Secondly, the next question we're going to ask is like, do we know where to go and do we know how to get there? Do we know where to go and do we know how to get there? So do we know where to go? Is linked to what your stakeholder expectations are. Do we know how to get there? This is your strategy. Do we know how to get there? So where is there? Menuju ke sana. Tapi apa yang itu sana? Sana yang link ke stakeholders. Maybe I shouldn't speak too much bahasa. It's not great. So do we know where to go? Is your stakeholders will tell you where to go. Do you know how to get there? How? Whether you take a bus or take a plane or take a bicycle or take a Gojek, how to get there is your strategy. If you have a lot of money, of course, you will take a plane. You have not enough money, you will walk, you will take a bus, or you will drive there. So how you get there is your business strategy. So if you don't have the right strategy, you will not get there. But depends on what your stakeholder tell you where to go. If you don't know where to go, you will never know how to get there. So if you don't know where to go, you will never get there because you just don't know where to go. You're just lost sesat. So the second part of the business model is that you need to audit the strategy and you need to audit where your stakeholders want you to go, and that's linked to stakeholder engagement. So understanding what they want is linked to where you want to go, is linked to how you want to get there, and it's linked to strategy. And now I know it's the difficult question, how do you audit strategy? And this is where you need to make sure that you understand your company strategy and to understand that you have the right strategy to support the right stakeholders in telling you where to go and how to get there. Let me clear this now. So I give you a few minutes to look at this diagram and understand and look at the questions. How do we get there? The top part here. But how do we get there depends on who our stakeholders are at the bottom. And how do we add value to them? We add value to them by understanding where do they want to go. So where do they want to go? Is linked then is to then how do we get there? So this is like the iceberg. This is the water. Beneath the iceberg, so how do you get there is driven by who are your stakeholders and where do they want you to go. But the important part is that the thing that links these two together, the thing that links your strategy and your stakeholders is this thing called culture. What we call shared beliefs. Remember the word percaya? Siapa yang percaya kepada kita? So siapa means stakeholders, percaya means beliefs. If this belief is shared by the company and shared by the stakeholders, it's called culture. So you have a shared belief. So beliefs here is your values and your beliefs. If it's shared, then you have the right strategy, meeting the expectation of your stakeholders. So culture is part of one of the 8 components of building trust. Stakeholder engagement is one of the components of building trust. Strategy is a tone at the top. So this is a tone at the top. It's linked to purpose. So this diagram is also another important diagram, is how it's all connected together. And the foundation, the starting point of everything is that who believes in us. Siapa yang percaya pada kita. So yang itu stakeholders. So ada 5 kumpulan stakeholders kan. So there are 5 stakeholder groups. Who are they? How do we add value to them? And we add value to them by understanding where do they want to go. And by understanding where do they want to go, we're able to get there. How we are able to get there. And to make sure that your strategy is linked to your stakeholders, is make sure that your beliefs are shared. Kepercayaannya sudah shared dengan stakeholders. And it's called corporate culture. And once you have alignment of stakeholders and culture and the tone at the top, you gain more trust. So remember, once again, the 8 components of trust. starting with today is we talk about business model, but we really talk about stakeholder engagement, we talk about culture, we talk about stakeholders, and what happens when all these are not aligned. This is where risk happens. So your strategy is not aligned with your stakeholders' expectations, things will go wrong. So when things go wrong, there's risk. So when auditors talk about risk universe, so this is a very familiar term, risk universe. Where does the risk universe come from? Risk universe comes from stakeholders. So your 5 stakeholder groups will give rise to your risk universe. So what can go wrong? We always ask ourselves as internal auditors, what can go wrong is linked to stakeholders. If you don't meet the expectations of stakeholders or you engage with the wrong stakeholder groups, things will go wrong. So internal auditors, when you do risk audit your risk management, you've got to make sure that it's linked to stakeholder engagement, linked to the tone at the top, linked to culture, linked to business model. So they're all intertwined and linked together. So let me clear this diagram here so that you can take a photo screenshot, clean shot. But once again, don't worry. EER will send you all the slides here. And myself and Erika, we are on LinkedIn. If you want any clarification, we'll be more than happy to share with you. I'm really very passionate about this topic. So to me, I've been spending a lot of time teaching risk management, but a lot of people don't realize that risk management is one of the 8 components of trust, together with business model, together with purpose, stakeholder engagement, sustainability report. So when you do SR, sustainability reporting is linked to all of this. So this, we'll talk about it later in the last section here when we talk about have we made a difference? Have we made a difference? That's linked to sustainability framework or sustainability reporting. So hope by now you get a lot of details as to understanding how each of the components are linked together. Let's do another poll. Who is responsible for culture in your company? So who is responsible for making sure that strategy and stakeholders, the glue, brings the strategy and the stakeholders together? Who is a chief culture officer in your organization? Interesting. It seems to be a split between the board and the CEO.
Yes. Still increase. CEO and board.
Wow. I think this, so we have, this is number 6 poll. We have 7 polls all together. I think the results of the poll are really, to me, it's very exciting poll. And I really thank you for all your contribution. I think for the participants, especially the poll on which is the most important stakeholder group, it's very exciting to see that customers are the most important stakeholder group from the internal audit perspective. Yes. Then the question to ask is how much time have you spent on engaging with the customers? How much time have you audited the customers? Wow, looks like the board is responsible for culture. Let me share with you in the Code of Corporate Governance for UK, for Singapore, and for Malaysia, the board is responsible for culture in the organization. Wow, so is by far 51% of the respondents say that the board is responsible for corporate culture. But how much time has the board spent on ensuring that the corporate culture works? If you look at the annual report of your company, do you talk about corporate culture? Do the chairman of the board, there's a commissary talk about how they have audited? How much time have you spent on auditing culture? So as internal auditors, how much time have you spent on auditing corporate culture in your organization? How do you audit corporate culture? How do you report corporate culture audit results to your board? Does the board even ask for corporate culture audits to be done? So these are some of the hot topics. If corporate culture is not appropriate, then your strategy and your stakeholder engagement is not linked together, and somewhere in there, things will get lost. So very, very interesting. And you got the right answer is correct. The board should be responsible for corporate culture, and is shown by the Code of Corporate Governance in Singapore, in the UK, and in Malaysia. So do read through those corporate codes on corporate culture. Just Google them, and you realize that it is a key area that a lot of people have forgotten about. You know, the audit committee has the internal auditor, the risk committee has the chief risk officer, but the board has no chief culture officer to help him do his work. And so, and very good that only 11% think that HR is responsible, because culture is more than HR. In fact, HR should be part of corporate culture, but strategy, the board, the CEO, everybody should be involved in corporate culture, not just HR. Very good results. Thank you. So the next question on the next internal audit checklist relating to the second area. Do we know where to go, and do we know how to get there? Do we know where to go? Do we know how to get there? These are the three sub-questions. Who are our stakeholders, and how do we add value to them? Who are our stakeholders, and how do we add value to them? So this is part of stakeholder engagement. What is the culture of our organization? And this is a very interesting question, because when you audit culture, does it mean that culture is either good or bad? So when you conclude, all audit reports normally have an audit conclusion. So you conclude that the audit area, say if you audit sales or procurement or payroll or IT security, IT controls, internal auditors always have a conclusion to the audit report. So we conclude that the audit internal controls are appropriate, is functioning well, and we have no significant findings. So what do you say for an audit of culture? Do you say you have a good culture, a bad culture, a right culture, a wrong culture? So what do you say? What do you say when you audit culture of an organization? So this is an important area. What is the culture of an organization? What is your strategic objectives? So how do you audit your strategic objectives? And are they aligned to the stakeholder expectations? So this is making sure that where the stakeholders want you to go and how you get there is linked together. So where do you want to go is linked to stakeholder expectation. And how do you get there is linked to the strategic objectives. And the glue, so expectation is one part, strategic objectives is the other part. So you need to audit both areas. And culture is a glue that brings them together. You need to audit the culture. You need to audit who your stakeholders are and what they want, which is how you add value to them. So adding value is linked to your purpose. I know some of you will be asking, so Prof. Loh, where do I start? Where do you start? And the starting point is, we said right from the beginning, read the IR framework, because that is your starting point. So they understand the basic definition as to what is IR, what is value creation, what's the definition of the business model, and what does the business model look like. So download the 2013 version and the draft 2020 version this year. So now we come to the last part. So we're almost there. We come to the last part of the presentation. I know it's 11:30 already, and most of you are probably very hungry. Not hungry for food, but hungry to download the IR framework and read it over lunch. So please eat your IR framework afterwards for lunch. Have we made a difference? So based on who your stakeholders are, based on understanding where you want to go and how you get there, at the end of the day, the bottom conclusion is that have we made a difference? Sudahkah kita membuat perbezaan? Have we made a difference? And this is very closely linked to sustainability report. If you can't make a difference, you cannot sustain it. and you're not able to sustain it, it cannot create value over the long term. So here, I just wanted to share with you, for those who are not familiar, sustainability reporting is required for all listed companies from this year onwards, and for banking corporations is from 2020. The link is at the bottom here. So I'm still reading the requirement from the Indonesian authorities with regards to sustainability reporting. But in Singapore, in Malaysia, it's already mandatory. In Philippines, I think in many ASEAN countries, it's already mandatory to do sustainability reporting. And what Ibu Erika has already mentioned, that sustainability reporting is a starting point of doing integrated reporting. So when you do sustainability report, it's already halfway through doing integrated report. But in order to do a good sustainability reporting, you must have the big picture in mind, understanding that sustainability reporting is only one of the 8 components of gaining trust. And gaining trust is driven by doing the integrated reporting or integrated thinking. So when you do a SR, just be mindful that it's only one of the 8 components of doing gaining trust with your stakeholders. And then the question you ask is, where do I start the 8 components? Well, I think you need to look at it, and different organizations have different priorities. It's a journey. It's never ending. And look at the priorities by discussing the tone at the top, discussing with the board as to what's important with the board, what's important to the stakeholders, and by then you'll be able to understand which are the 8 important, even the 8 areas, which are the more important one to start with. So to me, these 8 areas really expands the role of the internal auditors as both an assurance provider and an advisor to the board and advisor to the community, to the stakeholders. So it's an exciting time for internal auditors, and that's why we call it integrated reporting in the post-pandemic era, in the new normal era. Because trust is lost as a result of the pandemic, as a result of financial crises, as a result of a lot of things going wrong, as a result of business models not working. So trust need to be gained back. And we always say, who's the most trusted person in the organization? Who's the most independent? The internal auditor. So you are in the right position to help the company gain trust with the stakeholders of the organization. So maybe in future we can have a webinar on sustainability reporting. Yeah, Pak Ibu Erika.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to do. Yes.
Thank you. This is an exciting framework here to look at. I give you a few minutes to look at this framework and see all the various components. More importantly, look at the bottom part here. Inside, outside in, and inside out. Most sustainability reporting framework starts with GRI. So many ISR framework starts with GRI. What is GRI? GRI is a framework to gather data, to look at the important areas that impacts the external areas, external to the organization. So how does a company impact environment, social, and governance? So ESG stands for environment, social, and governance. So how does the company impact the outside? So for example, pollution. How does a company affect social in terms of pollution? How does a company impacts outside in terms of the community? How does a company affect governance in the community, in the country? So using this framework, it helps you to gather data. So GRI is about data gathering as to what are the important areas to look at with regards to sustainability reporting. So SR will report on the data gathered using GRI as a framework. Now you must remember, GRI is from the inside out. How does the company impact external? So company affecting external to the organization. So it's the inside out. Inside out. Now SASB, so GRI is one. companies in the US will use SASB. So SASB is outside in, meaning that how does external factors affect the organization? How does outside factors affect the organization? Outside in. So SASB provides you with a framework to gather data, same as GRI. How do you gather data to look at things which are important that affects the organization, not affecting the environment? So how does the environment affect the organization? How does things like climate change? How does rising sea levels? How does floods affect the organization? Whereas GRI looks at how the organizations affects climate. So one is outside in, one is inside out. So these are two completely different frameworks, and the world is currently divided on these two frameworks. But there is a initiative currently to combine the frameworks together. So there's a common framework, common platform initiative around the world to bring all the frameworks together. So SASB, IR, GRI, they're coming together, they're discussing how to bring it together. You can Google that, this common platform initiative, but it'll take a while. But in the meantime, whether you choose SASB, in fact, you can develop SR using IR as a framework. So there are three frameworks you can use to develop sustainability reporting. One, you can use SASB. Two, you can use IR. Three, you can use GRI, or you can use all three at the same time. So we've seen companies adopting one or the other, or combination of these three frameworks. Now, TCFD and CDP. TCFD is Task Force on Climate-related Financial Disclosure. TCFD is relatively new, it's about 2-3 years old. TCFD here very specifically relates to climate change. How does the climate affect the organization? CDP, Carbon Disclosure Frame Project, how does a company affect carbon emission in the world? Inside out, once again, and TCFD is outside in. I know there are a lot of acronyms, but as internal auditors, since you're already familiar with ISO 31000, COSO, the IA IA guidelines for doing internal auditing. So there's no excuse for not knowing all these frameworks. So IR is the first framework that you need to do your homework on here. That will take you a while to understand, and then look at the other frameworks. I think GRI and TCFD are important ones. SASB also. CDP less so, but you still need to be familiar with that. So IR, TCFD, GRI, and SASB are the frameworks that you need to be familiar with in order to understand how to do sustainability reporting. And when you bring them together, so IR actually is a good framework to adopt, because SR, IR, your AR, it all comes together into a common reporting framework. So IR is a common framework to bring everything together. And it doesn't stop there. So when you look at IR, it must lead to social aspiration. So what does the company aspire to do? So your reporting frameworks must lead to social aspiration. So one part of your reporting framework is your business model. And one of the social aspiration framework that's very common in many countries is called the UN SDGs. And there are 17 UN SDGs, and this is really, really important for you to know. So you must read up on the 17 UN SDGs. The 17 US SDGs come from the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. The PRI is not so important. These principles has to guide you as to make responsible investment, to make for companies to make investments in industries or in areas where it does not impact the community or the environment. But more importantly are the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact and the 17 goals of the UN SDGs. Because in achieving good reporting, whether it's SR or IR, it must lead to achievement of one or more of the 17 SDGs. So this is something that is a long journey, not easy to achieve, but many companies, including Olam, the example that Ibu Erika shared with you, have selected a few. So as guidance, you wouldn't choose all 17 SDGs. Companies who put all 17 SDGs in their goals are not being very practical. So companies will choose between 3 to 5 SDGs, 3 to 5 out of the 17 goals to achieve their social aspiration. By having these goals, it will drive your reporting framework and you will drive who you engage with. So the bottom line is that your stakeholders, who your stakeholders are, and where the bottom, ultimately it will link to your social aspiration of the 17 SDGs. So this is as big as it can go for the achievement of the frameworks. Okay, we're finishing already, coming to the end, so we can have open questions. Now, in terms of good sustainability reporting or impact reporting, I'm sharing with you 2 good examples. The link are here. Grab has a good example. Nike has a good example. So Grab 2019 sustainability report, or in fact, the more popular word to use now is impact. The impact on stakeholders. So Grab, take a photo of this. Grab is social impact report 2019. Very good report. This is the opening page of the Grab impact report. The Nike impact report 2019. The basis of this is GRI, but it goes beyond that. It's quite well integrated. Nestle has a good progress report. This is a 2019 report. Nestle's regard for the stakeholders. So Nestle, Nike, Grab, these are some of the best practices sustainability report that I've seen. I think calling it sustainability report is really a little bit out of fashion nowadays. They tend to call it impact report or stakeholder report. This is a good, you take a screenshot of this. This is one of the best TED Talk that I've listened to about impact, that the main main focus of this is gratitude, that in terms of making an impact to your stakeholders, it's all about gratitude. And it's not about making profits. It's not about maximizing profit for shareholders. So remember, the business roundtable say that it's not about maximizing profit. It's not about engaging shareholders, by making sure that there's a gratitude to all stakeholder groups, to your customers, employees, suppliers, community, and your shareholders. So 5 gratitude to the 5 stakeholder groups. And once again, this is a really, really good TED Talk to listen to. One of the best I've ever listened to. So another homework, you can watch this while you're eating your lunch. So after reading your IR framework, watch this YouTube TED Talk, the NT-CEO Playbook. So let's do a final poll before we conclude.
All, Pak Rizki.
Ya, Pak.
All.
Yeah, can you do the
Poll,
last
ya.
poll? Poll number 7.
Yeah.
Thank you. So can you please answer the question? Have you done a sustainability report?
Okay, 50% to go. Silakan Bapak Ibu yang belum.
Thanks, Erika, for sharing the link to the
Yes.
corporate reporting dialogue. That's a alignment project to bring together the different reporting frameworks. So that's an important link for internal auditors to read.
Yes. There's two links shared by Erika. You can try to access and download. Yeah, to all participants. I already tried. Yes. So 70% more. 73%. Silakan Bapak Ibu. Okay, you can end this polling.
Yeah, so it looks like the thanks, Pak Rizki, is half and half. So half say yes and half say no. I think that's a good progress. At least it's half have done it already. And I guess this is a journey. So I do encourage you, for those who have done their sustainability report, think about how it's linked to integrated reporting. So the final slide that I want to share with you is really how do you define impact in terms of making a difference. So defining impact is linked to which framework you choose, whether it's an outside in or inside out perspective. And then what are your plans to develop a sustainability or impact report? I personally prefer the word impact because sustainability is a bit technical. So I think it's more useful to use the word impact, and impact is linked to your stakeholders. So what impact have you made? Have you made a difference? I can use the word difference report. What difference have you made to your stakeholders? And that's really the whole intent of a sustainability report. Have you made a difference to your stakeholders? And the last couple of slides, sorry, I just wanted to share with you. We take a QR code link. This is a QR code link to the two research that we did last 2 years ago on how they also research done in 2019 and 2020. In fact, last year we did a research on how companies report on corporate culture, and this year we just issued a report on how companies do their stakeholder engagement. This report here is on how companies report on in the annual report. And I just wanted to share with you some of the research findings in terms of creating value for stakeholders. So these are the research done over 3 years. Do the business model commit to creating value beyond the shareholders? So do the business model, so what we did is that we look at the top 60 companies in Singapore and Malaysia, and we look at the annual reports and we see whether their business model have a commitment to more than the shareholder. And in the results shown here is that Malaysian companies tend to do better. So 52% of Malaysian companies over the last 3 years create value. They show a commitment to creating value for more than the shareholders, so beyond the shareholders. I think it's also because in Malaysia it's mandatory to do integrated reporting. That's why in the mindset they create value, they commit to creating value to beyond the shareholder. So if you want to look at good integrated report as a best practice, do look at Malaysia as a best practice example. In fact, they have an annual competition on integrated reports for the last 3 years.
Okay.
It's called a
Uantchern?
NACRA Awards.
Yeah. First of all, we have a raised hand from Pahari. Maybe before we end your presentations. Pahari, you want to ask something?
No, I think let Pak Uantchern finish.
Okay,
Oh,
thanks.
okay.
Almost finishing already.
Yes,
This is the last statistics. Does a business model create the value? Does it show the value created? Does it show the value created for the wider stakeholder group? So you can see the Malaysian companies tend to do better. It's not applicable now in 2017 for Malaysian companies because we didn't do the research on Malaysian companies in 2017. But you can see in this year alone, 60% of Malaysian companies show that they have created value for wider stakeholders, so beyond the shareholders, as opposed to the Singapore companies. So these are the 3 questions. Who believes in us? Do we know where to go, and do we know how to get there? Have we made a difference? And this is how you audit your business model. And this last slide is just about Black Sun. We are an international stakeholder company. We do annual reports, sustainability reports, and integrated reports. And this is our website link. So with that, let me go back to So thank you, everybody. We've come to the end of the formal presentation. Thank you to Ibu Erika for introducing to us what is integrated reporting and how it creates value over the long term and to gain trust. So this whole framework is about integrated reporting. So it is all about the reporting and to gain trust to the outcome. The objective for doing integrated reporting is to create value. And when you create value for your stakeholders, you gain their trust. And to do integrated reporting is all about the business model, engaging with the stakeholders, making sure that the corporate culture is linked to the tone at the top. You can sustain it moving forward in terms of the glue, making sure that your purpose, what is your why do you do the things you do? You create long-term value and managing the risk in terms of making sure that you meet the expectations of your stakeholders. So with that, I'll be happy and together with Ibu Erika, we'll be happy to take open questions from the participants.
Ya, Bapak Ibu silakan kalau ada yang mau menyampaikan raise hand, nanti saya akan unmute atau via chat kalau ada yang mungkin ada yang ingin diulang kembali apa yang tadi disampaikan. Pak Hari mungkin silakan kalau tadi raise hand, silakan.
Rizki, ya terima kasih Pak Rizki, Bapak Ibu sekalian, selamat siang. Prof. Uantchern and Erika, thank you very much for taking your time. You are very patient to deliver this very important message, and it was very clear and very important to us. Again, as from Indonesia, thanks for this opportunity, which is I think it's quality session. I hope it will help our members. I have a little question on regarding the GRI and the IIRC. Professor Mervyn King in 2014 came to us to Indonesia. He was chairman of GRI, and then the chairman of the IIRC. He told the story about how he created the IIRC. It was started because the Prince Charles was not very happy with the GRI. Something was missing from them. Probably the one you explained that because GRI is inside out. Ya, jadi GRI itu fokus pada pengaruh lingkungan terhadap pengaruh perusahaan terhadap lingkungan. While you also explain the TCFD is of different type, they explain bagaimana lingkungan mempengaruhi perusahaan. Jadi ada 2 ekstrim. Probably that was the real drawback. And then within the IIRC, the Prince Charles invite most of the accounting bodies. The IRC is where the FASB, IFAC, and ISB together in the same council. IA also part of the council, so this is I think very important. And as you explained as well, 2018 our OJK require for us to do the sustainability reporting. You said this is first step, but I think if we regard, to me, the IRC is a next step of the SR. That's why Professor Marvin King have moved from the GRI to the IRC as chairman. Yes, probably it is a first step, but if we look at the comprehensiveness of the IR, I think it will be difficult for us. If we go through the SR, we have to do effort to do a lot of effort finally, and then on the other hand, this is not complete because something is missing. We need other capital to be considered within the IRC. So to me, it will be duplicated effort. Like in Malaysia, you mentioned they should do the SR. On the other hand, they should also do the IR. My question, do you think this will be a duplicative effort for us, especially those who want to start? Why don't they start directly to the IR, because that will be more efficient, the effort will be less, but the report will be more comprehensive, inside out and outside in. That's my first question. My second question is that because in IR we have to report many non-qualitative, many non-financial data in the IR. Do you think internal audit will be more in the best position compared to the external auditor? External auditor will only able to assure to attest for the financial data because that was their capability. But we will be more broader. What is your thoughts on that? Thank you very much.
Ibu Erika, you want to take a shot at the first one, or I can take a shot at the second one? You're on mute.
The first one being the effort of the adoption.
Yeah. Right.
If that is the question, I want to say that achieving the gold standard of a more comprehensive report, I think, may be more difficult, and it can be more intimidating. But again, it's I think that it's worth the effort that you put in, and like Professor Lowe said, sustainability reporting is already on the way towards there. It's not, I wouldn't say that it's duplicative in a sense, because doing, if you are working towards sustainable reporting, you are in some sense, or a lot of it actually is working towards an integrated reporting mindset, and from the way you are thinking about the business and the impact. So it just takes just that little bit extra step to go towards the full integrated report, which is more comprehensive. And I think the ambition needs to be from the top to mobilize everybody to move together towards that direction. So I would not say, I would say do not be discouraged by the fact that it's, a very big job, because it's doable, and every organization is different. And the benefit of getting everyone to work together step by step on this journey, I think is a very big benefit in the long run that should not be overshadowed by the fear of there's so much work to do, because in the long run it will be worth it.
Yeah, thanks, Ibu Erika, and I totally agree with that. I think a lot of organizations in Malaysia and around the world have this initial worry that integrated report yang itu ada yang besar in terms of effort, but actually this is not big in terms of the effort, but it's more inclusive, and it gives you the integrated thinking mindset and help you to. So today, what I've given together with Ibu Erika, we've given you that mindset, that broad thinking, So here, if you look at this diagram, when you do your SR here, you will know where it fits in. So you are already now, all of you are integrated reporting or integrated thinking experts already. So by understanding that there are 8 components to building trust, it helps you believe that SR or sustainability reporting is only one component of the bigger picture. So I think it's more important to start with the big picture first, and then you know where the components fit in. Otherwise, once again, sesat lagi. Because you don't know, when you do the SR, you don't know where you're going. Yeah, Pak Adik?
I think that's my point. If we go directly to the integrated reporting with integrated thinking, that will be more efficient. Because at the moment, because of OJK regulation, we do a sustainability report, and we thought actually because of this regulation, sustainability is the big picture. While you said that's implication in practice, because it is very painful to do so. So probably we will lose the big picture.
Yeah.
But I think I agree with you that integrated reporting will be more comprehensive.
Yeah. Ya, saya pun setuju Pak Ari. Sustainability reporting must lead to outcome. Outcome-nya trust. And trust means if your stakeholders trust you, it means you create more value. And more value means more profits. So profits is as a result of trust.
Exactly.
And your second question on external auditors and non-quantifiable data. So things like trust. How do you audit trust? How do you audit culture? How do you audit tone at the top? How do you audit stakeholder engagement? So I think internal auditors, because you're operational in nature, you're much better positioned to do all these areas. So each of these 8 areas, so this is your audit universe. So don't look at auditing risk management or look at just internal controls. Those are important areas, but these are just as important, how it brings you together to trust. So I think internal auditors, we always say we are independent. And because we are independent, we are trusted. So internal auditors sekarang ni panggil Chief Trust Officer.
Okay. Okay. Pak Ari di unmute. Okay.
Nggak apa-apa. Okay.
Okay. Okay, Uantchern, there's some questions in the chat. You want me to read? So most of the question already answered during your sessions. Bapak Ibu ada beberapa. Yes. Okay. So I will read some of these questions from Pak Nur. Yeah. From definition, ER is also communicated prediction, prospect, not only what happened in the past and the futures. Are short and long term. The question is how to convince the reader of the ER report can rely on our assumptions and accept the predictions. Yes. So how to convince the reader of ER report that we can rely on the assumptions and for these predictions. Yeah.
I think it's no difference from the annual report, that the assurance is really given by management, first of all. So when the CEO and management and the board signs off on the integrated report or the annual report, they provide assurance to the reader that the ER can be relied upon in terms of the assumptions. In fact, it is the role of external auditors also to provide assurance to the whole report that is reliable. And I think internal auditors provide that even more can provide more assurance by looking at assumptions and the way that the integrated report is being prepared. And I will always believe that the internal auditors have a key role in providing assurance to the integrated report.
Okay, thank you. So this is from Dewi. What is the difference between a combined report, usually combined financial information and SR or sustainable report, and the ER?
The combined report is really probably is called the integrated report. So companies now combine the annual report, sustainability report, strategy report, financial report into one, so they call it combined report. But combined report is not a formal term, so most people will call it integrated report.
Okay.
In Malaysia and Singapore, is required to do sustainability reporting, but it's not required to produce a separate report. So it can be part of the integrated report. So I'm not familiar with in Indonesia whether you're required to produce a separate sustainability report. I'm still reading the requirement, or should it be? Can it be part of the integrated report?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
In our annual report, usually there are some section of sustainability report.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. But actually, we propose to our annual report awards committee that we should look into integrated reporting. But at the moment, it's not there yet.
Yeah.
Pak Danto is Rizki, Pak Danto.
Ya, ada yang resen. Oke, sebentar. Oke, Pak Danto, saya unmute. Silakan Pak Danto.
I think there's a question from, I think it's,
Yeah,
I'm not
thanks,
sure
Pak
it's
Rizki.
Ibu or Bapak. There's a question from Tatik. I just repost it on the.
Ya, Pak Danto. Ya, Uantchern, sorry. This is Pak Danto want to already raise hand. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Pak Rizki. Thanks also to Professor Law and to Erika. So before jumping into the questions, I would like to provide you with some background. Yeah. So I guess that in order for any companies to be able to create meaningful sustainability reports as part of their integrated reports, they firstly have to behave responsibly to the environment and social aspects as well in doing their business. So so that they will have a good content to share to the wider stakeholders. For some businesses, commitment to conducting responsible business can mean additional cost. For example, in fashion industry, some big fashion brands are now moving from fast fashion, which means more waste and massive negative impact to the environment, to what's so-called sustainable fashion. Yeah. So sustainable fashion requires, for example, more environment friendly material. For instance, organic cotton, or creating something from bamboo. Yeah. And it turns out that these materials might be far more expensive compared to just non-organic cotton or synthetic materials. And in addition to higher production cost, it came across the market has to be educated as well, which requires more marketing budget for market education around sustainable and more environment-friendly fashion products. So my questions are twofold, based on your experience. First, maybe a question to Professor Law. How companies can balance the extra cost and potentially lower profit margins or unfavorable financial performance in the short run with the long-term benefit of commitment to sustainable business. And the second questions to Erika, what kind of stories that leading companies normally disclose in the report to tell the stakeholders that sustainability might result in higher cost, but it will benefit companies in the long run. Okay, thanks.
I think if I can answer broadly first, I think sustainability reporting is not just the impact of the organization on the environment. You also need to look at the impact on the environment on the company. So outside inside out and outside in. I think that's the starting point that a lot of companies need to understand. Yeah. So I think we need to look at it from a broader perspective and think of that. So what it means is that when you do inside out, there's one stakeholders and external stakeholders. But outside in, there's internal stakeholders. So sustainability reporting has been too much focused on external stakeholders. So my starting point is that to understand impact, you need to look at it both from an internal stakeholders, meaning that to your employees, to the company, to management, to CEO, to the board, what's the impact? And then to external is to the suppliers, to the customers, what's the impact? So with that as a big thinking, let me then answer your first question, which is on how do you meet expectations of customers who has to pay a higher price because the cost of sustainability efforts like recyclable materials like bamboo will raise the cost of the prices of the products, let's say in your fashion industry. And my answer to that is that if the things that you do don't create value, then it's not sustainable. So whether it's a cheap price or a high price, it doesn't matter. The most important measure is that does it create value? So if you use a more expensive materials, if you can create value, meaning that your customers believe that, so percaya, dia percaya ada value sudah naik, then you can charge a higher price. So the justification is not the price, but really to ask the important question, how do you create value? And value is not just the price, the cheap. So cheap is not equal to value. So cheap is not good and good is not cheap. So value will be things like safety, reliability, trustworthiness, long-term lastingness. So these are definitions of value. So what do your customers believe in? If they believe in cheap price, then that's it, end of story. Then you use cheap materials because they want cheap price. If they want reliable material or material that is longer lasting, then you use a more expensive. So why do people buy a BMW? Why do they buy a Toyota? So they buy a BMW because, and they're willing to pay a high price for it because the value is really prestige, status, and it's not just, so they're willing to pay the price. So what do the stakeholders want with regards to value? And that's how you talk about engaging. So people think that pricing, people will be opposed to higher pricing, but that's because they don't engage with the stakeholders. They don't understand what the stakeholders want, and as a result, they think that they want cheap pricing. So that's my answer to your first question is really, you need to engage with the stakeholders to understand what is value. When you do sustainability reporting, it's too narrow the way that it's done nowadays. And to answer your question, second question, what was the second question again?
I think it was around what kind of story should to the corporation.
The kind of stories that people share in integrated reporting or case studies in integrated reporting or in sustainability reporting is around stakeholders. So once again, going back to who your stakeholders are. So do you have a customer story, employee story, supplier story? I tell you, in almost any report, there's no stories on suppliers. How you treat the suppliers fairly, decently, making sure that you give them fair credit terms, fair procurement terms. Because if your suppliers, you don't treat them properly as a stakeholder, what will happen? They'll give you substandard products. They will try to cut corners. And when they cut corners, so this is the outside in fact. You don't take care of your external stakeholders, what they do will affect your organization. So these were, once again, telling stories for at least your 5 stakeholder groups, employees, customers, suppliers, community. And in every annual report, there's always a CSR effort. It talks about CSR, your community, but that's inside out. How do you affect the community? But how does the community affect you? If the community don't go for training, how can your companies do well? If the community refuse to go for upgrading skills. So in today's pandemic, a lot of jobs are lost in Malaysia and Singapore, Indonesia. But if they don't go for training, how can they expect the company to prosper? So stories of inside out and outside in are important. So I hope that answers the question. So value creation in terms of non-financial indicators need to be much broader. You look at a lot of sustainability reports, is too narrow. It becomes a technical tick the box exercise, and people always measure the value as equal to costing. So I know that's a bit of a long answer, and maybe Bu Erika, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would like to emphasize the importance of creating a consistent story throughout. And this is one of the reason why integrated thinking and integrated report is so important is if you as an organization are able to, every organization is different. So there's no one story that you should tell your stakeholders to convince them that you are creating value and that they should trust you. But if you start with your purpose and you are able to tell a story that is consistent throughout, so starting from how is ingrained in your strategy and how in your market review you are considering all of these market forces such as sustainability in products. In fact, I will argue that there's increased demand already for sustainable fashion. It may not be something that you actually have to work too hard on. And going back to the consistency of story, you want to tell a story from a leadership point of view. People who read your report will want to read the leadership statements and see, are they telling the same story there as to what we are seeing in the strategy, in the market review, in the business model, in the performance, and finally, if you are reaching for the gold standard, are they actually walking the talk and linking their executive remuneration to some of these targets that they are so loudly proclaiming that they are doing, and as a business. So that would be my only take, is to communicate your story, which is unique to your organization, consistently throughout.
Thanks, Ibu Erika. To do a good sustainability report, you must have good stakeholder engagement. And sad to say, most companies don't do good stakeholder engagement. Remember, we talk about stakeholder engagement as an important area of gaining trust. And as internal auditors, you should audit stakeholder engagement. But this is generally very poorly done in many organizations. So they don't define stakeholder engagement properly. And stakeholders are both internal and external. Let's take, for example, now, Black Lives Matter. In the US, is a big movement now on Black Lives Matter. So this is how an external event impacts internally. So it's outside in, instead of inside out.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Uantchern, Bu Erika. I think we already finished the time. So thank you very much, Professor Law,
Sorry for
Bu
going
Erika,
over time.
for providing such comprehensive sessions. Well done. So pada Bapak Ibu sekalian, terima kasih banyak ya. Jadi tadi ada di chat saya sampaikan juga link untuk integrated report ORG ya, bisa di-download di sana materi integrated report yang disampaikan tadi Uantchern Law. Cukup lengkap, ada 50 halaman, bisa di-download. Principal guidance ada di sana, konten elemen apa saja yang ada di dalam integrated report yang diperlukan ada di sana. Thank you once again to all participants that have joined today wonderful sessions, termasuk juga yang sudah asking questions, Bapak-bapak sekalian, to all support from the executive office, para board sekalian, thank you very much. So I hope all participants got benefit and have deep understanding on how integrated thinking will enable a business model and resilience and adaptability for organization in time of this crisis. Yeah. So I think already 12:25. Yes. So good afternoon. Many thanks again. See you in the next sessions.